What is up, everyone? Welcome back to our Kings related podcast, wherever you may be. And with the NBA on the All Star break, and the Kings are ninth in the Western Conference. They are one game over 500, 28 and 27, tied with the Golden State Warriors in that jam-packed, congested play-in race in the Western Conference. And the Kings, they entered this All-Star break on a somewhat difficult note, losing a irresponsible, inexcusable game against the New Orleans Pelicans just the other night on Thursday. Because CJ McCollum hates Sacramento, and the Kings, the defense was not great in that game, and you wasted two monster games by both Domantas Sabonis and Zach LaVine, who had his best game thus far since he's been a Sacramento King. So, and that game on Thursday night in New Orleans pretty much summed up this King season to this point. Because as fans, we were so optimistic going into this season. Oh, this team is going to win 50 games. After acquiring DeMar DeRozan in the offseason in that 3-team deal between Sacramento, Chicago, and San Antonio. But get close. Other fans, if you're watching this or listening to this, let me tell you something. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say this. And I'm mostly a positive person. I believe, in my opinion, I think Sacramento Kings did the wrong thing at the deadline. I truly believe they should have fully reset, because this team has never reset it and went through a proper rebuild, because they always take shortcuts and put band-aids over everything. And I'm sorry to say this, but I have absolutely no faith in this front office or in this Kings team. And I haven't all season. When you fired Mike Brown at 13 and 18, a day after you blew that Detroit Pistons game after Christmas, and that was your 5th straight home loss in December, part of that easy patch of your schedule. The Kings have not played close enough good basketball with Mike Brown. I'll say it, and I don't know if Mike Brown would admit this, but Mike Brown this season, as the head coach of the Kings, he was not good. His coaching staff wasn't good. And this team, with Mike Brown, they underachieved as a squad. They absolutely did. So, and I don't understand how this team is ever supposed to even sniff the playoffs this year. Because if you just look at that play-in race, you got Minnesota, You got Dallas. You got Golden State. You got Phoenix. And you got San Antonio. Plus, plus if you want to add both LA teams, and the Clippers and then the Lakers. And then also, besides the playoffs, how is this Kings team ever going to sniff the conference finals in the next 5 years? It is not possible or realistic. So, and that's why when you traded De'Aaron Fox, and I thought it was going to happen in the summer, but if you watch the Kings play on this last 6-game road trip where they went 1-5, that is a team that had the rumors of De'Aaron Fox and everything that happened get into that locker room. It affected that team, and it needed to happen. And then you bring in Valanciunas, you bring in LaRavia, things that this front office should have addressed after that playoff series loss against Golden State a couple years. But they didn't. What did they do? What did this front office do after that playoff series? They sat on their hands, they ran the same damn team back, and what did that team get you? It got you nowhere. It got you in a play-in spot. You went from being the 3rd seed in the West to a play-in team. And they did nothing at that trade deadline at the time. They did nothing in that offseason. And then in the moment that they needed to add size and wing and front court help is when they traded their star player at this past deadline. And the Kings, and even though the Kings are 15-9, I believe, under interim head coach Doug Christie, it's still not a great team in the Kings. You just look. How many teams? Because the Kings will never do this. Because they never do. The Kings always take shortcuts. That's what they do. Look how many shortcuts they took during that 16-year playoff drought. And where did that get them? Got them nowhere. The Kings are in a position right now in the NBA where no team ever wants to be. They are a team stuck in the middle. And that's not where you want to be. So, how many times or how many teams rebuilt in the time that the Kings have continued to peak around that middle ground, middle of the pack? Exactly where all the good organizations would say is the worst place to be. And if you just pull up the NBA standings right now, the good organizations who have rebuilt, first off, they traded their star players and they rebuilt. And look at where they are now. Oklahoma City Thunder. They traded their stars. They rebuilt. They were bad. They are the best team in the league. The Houston Rockets. They traded their star. And look where they are now. They are one of the most exciting, young, up-and-coming teams in the West. And they are 4th in this conference. And then you look at a team now that's on the rise, who I believe will be really good next season. And they traded their star. And they have rebuilt. And that is the Portland Trailblazers. They will be a team really good next year. Another team, the Orlando Magic. Look what they did last season. They were the surprise team in the East last year. They traded their star. They rebuilt. And look at where they are now. They're 7th in the East in that play-in. They kind of come back. I know they've dealt with a lot of injuries on that team, but they are a young and exciting team who rebuilt, and look at where they are now. The Detroit Pistons, who spent all those years being bad and rebuilding, look at where they are now. They are one of the top 6 teams in the Eastern Conference. They are 3 games over 500. What do all those teams have in mind? They traded their stars and they rebuilt because those are good organizations. Unlike the Sacramento Kings, who always take shortcuts. This organization is so afraid to rebuild. And that's why I disagreed with what they did at the deadline. Does it help you for this season? Yes. But this team got older at the deadline. DeMar DeRozan's mid early 30s. Levine, I believe is 29, 30. But this Kings team right now, it has a timer. And that timer is fastly clicking. And I left off a team that traded their star and they rebuilt and they got lucky in the lottery. And that is the San Antonio Spurs. And they got the best player in the deal in De'Aaron Fox. And even though they're 12th in the West, they are going to make noise post this All-Star break. So that is why I am not optimistic about the long-term outlook of this Kings team. Because you put a timer on this team. And is Doug Christie going to be the head coach long-term after this season? If they don't make the playoffs, Doug Christie will not be the head coach long-term. I think, in my opinion, the only way Doug Christie gets that interim tag removed is if this team makes the playoffs. That's just the reality of the fact, folks. I'm just tired of this organization always taking shortcuts and not going through proper rebuilds. We just went through a 16-year playoff drought. And during that drought, we saw a lot of bad basketball. What's another 3 to 4 years of rebuilding? It's not it's worth it. So, and if you look at the Kings right now, as I mentioned, they're tied with Golden State at 28 and 27. 9th place in the West. I don't believe the Kings will get to that top 6. I think they'll float around that play-in with all those teams in the mix. But if you look at the Sacramento Kings after this All-Star break, let me just read you their schedule coming out of this All-Star break. If you thought these past few games were tough. You haven't seen the schedule. The Kings just wrapped up 10 of 12 games on the road. Here is the Kings schedule after the All-Star break. You got the Golden State Warriors in Sacramento on Friday. And then you got the Charlotte Hornets. And then you're on the road against the Utah Jazz. And that Utah game is the beginning of a 4-game road trip that takes you to Utah, Houston, Dallas, and the Denver Nuggets. Utah, who've you beaten? You should win that game. The Houston Rockets, who you are, I believe you're 2-0 against this season, and this is your final game, so you kind of won you won the season series against the Rockets. The Dallas game, you won that season series. You're 2-0. That is the last game against Dallas this season, so it would be nice to sweep them. And then you got the Denver Nuggets, who you are 0-2 against. And then March 7th is the big game. It is the return to Sacramento for De'Aaron Fox. And that is a massive game. Both in the Western Conference and in that play-in. And then you got a back-to-back. You're in Los Angeles, taking on the Clippers. And then the next night, March 10th, you're taking on the New York Knicks. That is brutal. You have yet to beat the Clippers, and the Knicks beat you handily on your last 6-game road trip in New York. And they put up, I believe, 140 points against you. You got 2 days off. And then you got a road back-to-back against Golden State on the 13th, and then March 14th, you're in Phoenix. And then you got a 7-game homestand at the end of March. And here are those games. Get ready. Buckle up, folks. You got the Memphis Grizzlies. And then you got a back-to-back against the best team in the East in Cleveland, and then the Chicago Bulls. You should beat the Bulls. The Bulls are tanking for Cooper Flag. And then you got the Milwaukee Bucks, who they beat you in Milwaukee. And then you got a brutal back-to-back on March 24th and 25th. You got the Boston Celtics, and then you got the Oklahoma City Thunder. Good luck on that back-to-back. And then you got the Portland Trailblazers, who just beat you a couple weeks ago in Portland. And then you go on the road for a 6-game road trip at the end of the season in Orlando, in Indianapolis, in Washington, in Charlotte, and then you finish up in a back-to-back at Cleveland, at Detroit. That is a brutal 6-game road trip at the end of the season. Just brutal. And then your final 3 games are at home against the Nuggets, the Clippers, and the Phoenix Suns. Just absolutely brutal stretch of basketball for the Kings here coming out of this All-Star break. But I'm telling you right now, the month of March of games, this is either going to sink the Kings in the Western Conference, or they're going to play some inspired ball. Because if their defense does not improve for this stretch run coming out of the All-Star break, this team is going to absolutely sink themselves in the Western Conference. So for my fellow Sacramento Kings fans out there, buckle up, grab that seatbelt, buckle up, because it's going to be a wild ride here down the stretch here for the Sacramento Kings. And I'm gonna continue to mention this. The Kings are one game over 500. They have been flirting with that 500 record for most of this season. And that is why I will continue to preach this. That is why, in my opinion, they made the absolute bad move at the deadline. They should have fully reset. But because the Kings are not a good run organization, they always take shortcuts. And they don't always work out for the Kings. So, good luck for this stretch run of this NBA season. We're going to need it because I just read you that. It's a 7-game homestand at the end of March. And you got 2 back-to-backs on that homestand. That homestand right there will tell us a lot. But also not just that homestand, but that entire month of March will tell us all we need to know. So, the Kings were 13-18 with Mike Brown. And yes, I know Mike Brown did not do a good enough job as head coach while he was here at the beginning of this season. Neither did his coaching staff. And this team underperformed this season. And I think the front office has underperformed, and that's why I believe this summer the Sacramento Kings will be looking for a new front office. Because I don't know about you as a fan, if you're watching this or listening to this, but I have zero faith in this front office. Absolutely zero faith. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't think they've done enough. What should have happened after that playoff series against Golden State, where you went through a thrilling 7 games, that's where you should have made changes that offseason to improve the team. But you didn't. Instead, you ran the same damn team back for the next season. And we know where that got us. So, thanks for tuning in to this episode of our Kings-related podcast. Just buckle up, everyone. Because this season, if you thought the quote-unquote first half of this season was bumpy, this post-All-Star break run is going to be bumpy, and we'll know a lot about this team after the break and how they'll play. And I know they'll get together for the first time as a team for their real first practice on Wednesday and then Thursday. And I don't think practice is going to change a lot from what we've seen. I thought Thursday was the best I think this team has looked. But I don't think 2 days of practice coming up this week is going to do a lot to change this team. I just think this team is flawed, and I don't think it's a good put together roster. You don't. First off, you don't have a true point guard on this team now since you traded Fox. And your defense is non-existent now. Because your two best defenders are Keon Ellis, who should be playing at least 30 minutes every game, and then Keegan Murray, who those are your two best defenders on this team. So we'll see how this stretch run goes for the Sacramento Kings. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up, and also leave a comment in the down below in the YouTube comments. If you're listening on your preferred audio platform, Apple, or at Spotify, please hit that follow button. Rate 5 stars. Leave a nice review, be much appreciated. And we're also available wherever else you get your favorite podcasts. Just as we close it out here, just be prepared for this stretch run. It's going to be a wild run and a wild drive. So, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of our Kings related podcast. Thank you, and as always, go Kings.